I don't know where to start, she said softly. I guess I used to be full of dreams. I painted, I wrote little poems, I laughed a lot. But over time, I stopped. I started living on autopilot, doing what needed to be done, not what made me happy. I love Daniel, but I think I stopped showing it. And I think I stopped showing myself who I am. Her voice cracked slightly. She didn't cry, but her eyes glistened. The room was silent, no one interrupting, just listening. Daniel's camera sat untouched beside him. For the first time in months, he saw his wife's eyes filled with raw honesty, and it almost broke him. Marcus leaned forward slightly. That's brave, Emma. Most people don't say things like that out loud. She shook her head. It's not bravery. It's just truth. I think I forgot what it feels like to be really seen. Jamal smiled softly. Then maybe this is your start. The conversation went on for hours. They spoke about how people lose themselves trying to be perfect, about how silence can destroy a relationship faster than arguments ever could. Daniel barely said anything. He just watched, sometimes smiling, sometimes lost in thought. He saw the walls between him and Emma start to crumble, not because of his words, but because she was finally speaking again. When the clock hit 9, Daniel quietly turned on the camera. Let's capture a little, he said. Emma froze for a second, but then nodded. The lens didn't scare her anymore. It didn't feel like judgment. It felt like freedom. She spoke about her fears, her marriage, her loneliness. Marcus and Jamal listened, offering small pieces of wisdom that came from experience, not ego. There was no tension, no drama, only truth being shared between 4 people who had decided to stop pretending. At one point, Daniel asked Emma, "When did you start feeling lost?" She hesitated. Maybe when I stopped believing that small moments mattered. We used to sit together, talk about our dreams, even silly things. Now we just check our phones and go to bed. Somewhere in all that, I disappeared. The room grew quiet again. Jamal finally said, "Sometimes love doesn't disappear. It just falls asleep." That line stayed with her. When they finally stopped recording, the atmosphere felt lighter, as if a window had been opened after a long storm. Daniel smiled at everyone, his eyes moist with emotion. "Thank you," he said. "That was more powerful than I imagined." Emma looked at Marcus and Jamal as they stood to leave. She felt strange gratitude. These 2 men had been strangers hours ago, and now she felt she'd known them for years. Their honesty had pulled something out of her she thought was gone. As the door closed behind them, Daniel turned to her. "How do you feel?" She took a moment before answering. "Lighter," she said, "and scared. But in a good way." He smiled gently. "You did amazing." She looked at the camera sitting quietly on the table. "Did you get what you needed?" Daniel shook his head. "I got more than I hoped for." That night, as Emma washed her face and got ready for bed, she couldn't stop thinking about what happened. She had walked into the evening full of fear and doubt, but something inside her had shifted. For the first time in years, she'd spoken openly, not as a wife trying to be strong, but as a woman rediscovering her voice. She looked at her reflection in the mirror and whispered, "Maybe this isn't so crazy after all." The truth was, she didn't fully understand Daniel's project, but she finally understood its purpose. It wasn't about cameras or storytelling. It was about unlocking something deep inside, the kind of truth people hide, because it's too hard to say. And as she lay beside Daniel that night, she felt something new between them. Not the old comfort, but something more fragile and hopeful. Maybe this was what Daniel wanted all along. Not just a film, but a way for them to see each other again. Tomorrow, she would meet Marcus and Jamal again. This time, she wouldn't be nervous. This time, she would be ready to open up even more. Not for the camera, but for herself. Over the next few weeks, Emma's life began to change quietly, but deeply. What started as an awkward experiment turned into something meaningful, something she couldn't quite explain. Each meeting with Marcus and Jamal felt like peeling away another layer of herself. The camera no longer felt like a wall. It felt like a mirror showing who she really was beneath all the silence and routine. The filming sessions became regular, sometimes at home, sometimes outdoors. They would meet in parks, cafes, and once even by the riverside where the city lights reflected off the water. Daniel filmed everything, always watching carefully but never interfering. His calm presence behind the camera gave Emma comfort, though she sometimes wondered what he truly thought when he saw her connecting so easily with the two men. Marcus had a steady way of speaking. He didn't use many words, but when he did, they carried weight. His calmness gave Emma peace. He'd talk about how pain could either harden people or open them up, and that love was just another form of courage. Jamal was the opposite, energetic, expressive, and funny. He would play soft tunes on his guitar between talks, sometimes turning heavy moments into laughter. Together, they balanced each other. And Emma found herself drawn to their friendship in a natural, human way. For the first time in years, she looked forward to each day. She smiled more, laughed more, even dressed differently. Lighter colors, simpler clothes, nothing fancy, but full of life again. Daniel noticed it all. He didn't say much, but sometimes she caught him watching her with quiet pride. One afternoon, during a break in filming, Marcus turned to Emma and asked, "What's the hardest thing you've never said out loud?" The question hit her like a wave. She hesitated. Then, without overthinking, she said that I don't always feel enough. Not as a wife, not as a woman. I try to be strong, but inside, I'm scared that I've lost something I can't get back. Marcus nodded slowly. You're not alone in that, Squaw added softly. Most people never say that out loud. You just did. That's strength. Emma smiled faintly, but tears welled up. It wasn't sadness, it was relief. Someone had heard her, not to fix her, but to understand her. Later that day, Daniel packed up the camera and said, I think that's the best thing we've recorded yet. His voice was full of emotion. Emma, you're amazing. But that night, as Emma lay awake, she realized something deeper was happening. This project had started as Daniel's idea, but it had become something more personal for her. It wasn't about being filmed. It was about learning how to feel again. She wasn't falling for anyone new. She was simply remembering how to connect with others, with herself, with life. Still, there were moments when things felt complicated. She could sense that Daniel sometimes struggled to watch her open up so freely with Marcus and Jamal, though he said nothing. His silence sometimes spoke louder than words. One evening, after Marcus and Jamal left, Emma found Daniel sitting alone, staring at his laptop. Are you okay? She asked. He smiled weakly. Yeah, just thinking. You and they. You're incredible together. I never realized how powerful honesty could be. She sat beside him. You brought this to life. You helped me open up again. He nodded but didn't speak. She reached for his hand. Daniel, you're still the one who knows me best. This project, it's not pulling me away from you. It's bringing me back. His fingers tightened around hers. That's all I wanted. After that, something between them shifted again, not fully healed but warmer. Daniel started smiling more, and Emma felt the distance slowly closing. One Saturday, they all decided to film at a small park on the edge of the city. It was a beautiful day, the air cool and full of sunlight. They spread out a blanket and sat beneath a tree. Jamal strummed his guitar while Marcus shared thoughts about forgiveness and how people hold on to guilt for too long. Emma listened, her eyes closed, feeling the breeze move through her hair at one point. Jamal turned to her and asked, What's one thing you've learned from all this? She thought for a moment. That love isn't always soft. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes it makes you face the parts of yourself you try to hide. But if you stay honest through it, you find peace again. Marcus smiled. That's the truth. Daniel stopped filming for a moment. He looked at Emma, then at the two men. This is what I wanted from the start. Real stories, real hearts. The camera clicked off, but none of them moved. They just sat there, quiet, as the sound of Jamal's guitar drifted into the evening air. Emma felt an unexpected calm wash over her later that night when they reviewed the footage. Emma watched herself on the screen and barely recognized the woman speaking. She looked alive, confident, expressive, honest. She turned to Daniel and whispered, "Is that really me?" He smiled proudly. "That's you, Emma. The real you." Something inside her finally clicked. She realized Daniel's strange idea had never been about filmmaking alone. It had been about saving their marriage, about helping her rediscover her strength and voice. And he had been brave enough to share that journey with others. A few days later, as they filmed one of the last sessions, Marcus looked at Daniel and said, "You know, not many people would do what you did, invite others to help heal what's broken. That takes trust." Daniel chuckled softly. It wasn't easy, but seeing Emma like this makes it worth it. Emma smiled. "You gave me back my courage." For the first time in a long time, she saw her husband's eyes light up, not from pride, but from love. Emma Parker sat quietly in her bedroom, the soft hum of rain against the window matching the uneasy rhythm of her heart. Her husband, Daniel, stood near the doorway, his face serious, almost nervous. It wasn't like him. Usually, Daniel's voice filled their Atlanta home with laughter or some new idea to keep life exciting. But tonight, his eyes avoided hers. And the silence between them felt heavier than any argument. "Emma," he said finally, "there's something I need to talk to you about." His tone made her straighten up. She had no idea that this moment would change everything between them. Daniel had always been the dreamer, a filmmaker full of strange ideas that somehow worked. He was gentle but stubborn, kind but unpredictable. Emma loved that about him. But lately she had noticed the distance. Their conversations had turned shorter, their dinners quieter, and their smiles felt forced. She feared something was breaking. And now it seemed Daniel was ready to confirm it. He sat beside her, hands clasped tightly, and said, "I've been working on something important. Something I can't do without you." Emma blinked. "What do you mean?" "I want to make a film," he said, his voice steady but low. "Not just any film, something real. Something that shows what trust, love, and connection truly mean. I want to capture people opening up, sharing what's in their hearts. And I want you to be part of it." Emma let out a small, confused laugh. "You mean like an interview?" Daniel shook his head. "Not exactly. I've invited 2 people, Marcus and Jamal, to help. They're part of a community project I've been filming. They've gone through a lot in their lives, and they're willing to open up on camera about what love means to them. I want you to join them. To talk, to listen, to share your story, too." Her smile faded. She stared at him, trying to understand. "You want me to talk about our life? With 2 strangers?" Daniel nodded. "Not to expose us. To heal, to connect. You've been distant, Emma. I've been distant. We both have. I thought maybe if we share what's real, the pain, the hope, everything, maybe we can find something again." Emma didn't answer. She felt the floor drop under her feet. 2 men she didn't know. A project about love and honesty. And her husband asking her to open up in front of them. It sounded too strange, too uncomfortable. Yet the sadness in Daniel's voice told her it came from love, not madness. "Why me?" she whispered. He looked at her with tired eyes. "Because you've forgotten who you are, Emma. You used to open your heart so easily. You used to feel everything. Now you just live quietly. I miss the woman who used to cry at movies, who used to dance in the kitchen when a song came on. I want her back. And maybe this. Maybe talking to people who've been through pain and love will help you find that spark again." Her throat tightened. Part of her wanted to walk away, to tell him this idea was ridiculous. But another part, the silent one that had been aching for months, knew he was right. She had changed. Life had dulled her edges, and her marriage had settled into quiet patterns. "Still," she said, "Daniel, you can't just bring 2 men into our home and expect me to. Talk about feelings. It's too strange." He gave a small smile. "They're good people. Marcus teaches at a local school. Jamal's a musician. They're both part of the foundation I'm filming for. They understand what it means to open up. You won't be uncomfortable, I promise. It's not about them. It's about you. About us." Emma looked away, her fingers fidgeting with the ring on her hand. She remembered when Daniel first proposed to her, how certain everything felt. But now, after years of marriage, they were strangers sharing the same bed. She loved him deeply. But she couldn't deny that something had gone quiet inside her. Maybe this project was his way of saving them. Or maybe it would be the thing that finally broke them apart. She stood up and walked to the window. The rain had stopped. The air outside shimmered with that soft, clean scent of fresh water. She turned back to Daniel. "You really believe this will help us?" He nodded. "I believe in truth. I believe when people speak from the heart, walls come down. I want that for us." Kema sighed. She could see the hope in his eyes, the same hope that made her fall in love with him all those years ago. She didn't understand his plan, but she couldn't bring herself to crush it. Maybe it was worth trying, if only to see if there was still something left between them. "All right," she said finally, her voice trembling. "I'll do it, but I don't know how much I can say." "That's enough," he replied softly. "Just be you." As Daniel left the room, Emma sat back on the bed, staring at the empty space he'd just filled. Her heart was racing. Not with fear exactly, but with confusion. She didn't know who Marcus and Jamal were, but the thought of sharing her emotions with strangers made her nervous. Still, somewhere deep inside, she felt a flicker, a strange curiosity about what this experience might reveal. She looked around the quiet room, noticing for the first time how lifeless it had become. The walls were filled with old photos, smiles from a different time. Maybe Daniel was right. Maybe she had lost herself somewhere between work, chores, and silence. But what if opening up brought out feelings she didn't expect? What if it made things even more complicated? She tried to shake off the thought. Daniel loved her that much, she knew. He wouldn't hurt her. This was just another one of his creative ways to fix things. And yet, she couldn't ignore the strange mix of fear and excitement running through her chest as she got ready for bed. She whispered to herself, "It's just a project. Just talking." But deep down, she knew it was more than that. This wasn't just about a film. It was about finding out who she really was and what her marriage had become. And as the night stretched on, Emma realized something. She wasn't afraid of the two men Daniel had invited. She was afraid of what she might discover about herself. When they finally looked her in the eye and asked her the questions she'd avoided for years, tomorrow, she would meet them. Tomorrow, she would face Daniel's idea. But tonight, she lay awake listening to the soft drip of rain outside, wondering if this was the start of healing or the beginning of the end. The next evening arrived faster than Emma expected. She barely slept the night before, her mind filled with questions and quiet worry. When morning came, she tried to distract herself by cleaning the house and rearranging things that didn't need rearranging. Every time she passed the clock, her stomach tightened a little more. By evening, the air inside their Atlanta home felt heavy, like it was waiting for something to happen. Daniel seemed calm, moving around the living room, setting up his small camera and adjusting the light from the tall floor lamp. He had that quiet focus in his eyes, the look he always got before starting one of his creative projects. Emma sat on the couch, hands folded tightly together. She wanted to believe in this in him, but doubt still whispered in her head. Then came a knock at the door. Daniel opened it with a welcoming smile. "Emma," he said gently, "this is Marcus and this is Jamal." The two men stepped inside. Marcus was tall, with kind eyes and a calm presence that filled the room without effort. He looked like someone who had seen a lot but carried it gracefully. Jamal was younger, full of energy, with an easy smile that made people feel comfortable right away. He carried a small notebook in one hand, like someone who never stopped writing ideas down. Emma stood up, her voice quiet. "Hi," she said, trying to sound steady. Jamal grinned. "Hi, Emma. Daniel's told us a lot about you, how creative you are." She smiled politely. "I'm not sure I'd call myself that." Marcus chuckled softly. "You don't have to be. Just be honest. That's the hard part." Daniel gestured toward the chairs he'd arranged in a small circle. "Let's sit and talk first. No cameras yet." They all sat down. The living room felt strange. The same space Emma used to watch movies and drink tea now looked like a set for something serious. Daniel started by explaining his vision again. A conversation about what love means when life changes, about what people hold back and what they reveal. Emma listened quietly. At first, it sounded too personal, too open. But when Marcus began talking, the air shifted. He spoke about losing his wife 5 years ago and how grief had forced him to understand love in a new way, not as a feeling, but as a choice. His voice didn't break. It carried calm acceptance, the kind that comes after pain has already done its worst. Then Jamal spoke. He told them about his childhood, growing up in a small neighborhood where music became his escape. He said that love for him was rhythm, a heartbeat that reminded him he was alive. His words were poetic but simple. And the sincerity in his voice touched Emma more than she expected, for the first time. She forgot about the camera and her nerves. She looked at both men and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: connection. Real human connection. Daniel turned to her. "Your turn, Emma." Her heart jumped. She hadn't planned what to say. For a moment, she thought about refusing, but Marcus gave her a reassuring nod. She took a deep breath and began. "I don't know where to start," she said softly. "I guess I used to be full of dreams. I painted, I wrote little poems, I laughed a lot. But over time, I stopped. I started living on autopilot, doing what needed to be done, not what made me happy. I love Daniel, but I think I stopped showing it. And I think I stopped showing myself who I am." The day of the final shoot came quietly, without the excitement or nerves that filled the earlier sessions. Emma woke up before sunrise, watching the soft golden light spill through the window. For the first time in years, she didn't feel lost. She didn't feel unsure. She felt calm, grounded in a way she hadn't since her wedding day. The project that once frightened her had become something sacred, something that had healed more than she could ever explain. Downstairs, Daniel was already setting up the last pieces of equipment. He looked tired but content, like a man who had finally reached the end of a long road. When he saw her, he smiled. "Morning," he said softly. "Morning," she replied, pouring herself a cup of coffee. There was a quiet peace between them, not the silence that used to carry distance, but one filled with understanding. Marcus and Jamal arrived a little after 9, both carrying the same warm energy as always. They greeted Emma with hugs, casual and friendly, like old friends meeting again after years. The living room, once filled with tension and uncertainty, now felt bright and welcoming. Daniel adjusted the lighting one last time, then sat across from Emma. "This is the last one," he said. "No script, no plan. Just honesty." Emma nodded. "I think that's all we've done since this started." When the camera light turned red, no one spoke for a moment. The quiet hum of the city outside filled the space. Then Daniel asked gently, "Emma, when we started this, you seemed afraid. How do you feel now?" She took a breath, looking straight into the lens. "I was afraid," she said. "Afraid of opening up, of showing what's inside. But this project taught me that love doesn't die when things get quiet. It just waits for you to speak again." Her words came easily, like water flowing after a long drought. When we stop talking, when we stop trying, we don't just lose each other, we lose ourselves. This wasn't about cameras or strangers. It was about remembering what love really means, showing up even when it's uncomfortable. Marcus leaned forward. "That's the truth. Love is a choice you make every day." Jamal nodded. "And it's not always easy, but it's worth it when you see what it gives back." Daniel didn't say much, but his eyes were full of pride. He looked at Emma like he was seeing her for the first time all over again, the woman he fell in love with. The woman who had laughed, dreamed, and loved without fear. After the filming wrapped, they decided to watch some of the footage together. The living room lights were dim, and the soft glow of the television filled the room. On screen, Emma saw herself speaking, crying, smiling. She saw the 3 men listening to her, encouraging her, and she saw Daniel watching her with quiet love. It was surreal to watch herself being so open, so vulnerable. But instead of embarrassment, She felt pride. She had grown. When the screen went dark, no one spoke for a while. Then Marcus said quietly, "You've got something powerful here, Daniel. This isn't just a story, it's a message," Jamal added. "People need to see that love doesn't always look perfect. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it breaks before it rebuilds." Daniel nodded. "That's what I wanted people to understand." He turned to Emma. "I didn't do this to test you or to make you uncomfortable. I did it because I couldn't stand watching you fade away. I thought maybe if we faced the truth together, we could find our way back." Emma reached out, taking his hand. "You didn't lose me, Daniel. I just forgot how to be found." Tears filled his eyes, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The air was full of something real: forgiveness, gratitude, love. Later that evening, after Marcus and Jamal left for the last time, the house felt strangely quiet again, but not empty. The walls seemed to hold all the laughter, all the confessions, all the honesty they had shared. Emma stood by the window, watching the sunset over the neighborhood. The orange sky slowly turned into soft purple, and she felt a sense of closure, not just for the project, but for the part of her life where she had lived half asleep. Daniel walked up behind her, wrapping his arms gently around her shoulders. "You okay?" he asked. She smiled, leaning into him. "More than okay. I feel alive again." He chuckled softly. "That was the plan." She turned to face him. "You know, I thought you were crazy when you asked me to do this." "I was," he admitted with a grin. "But it worked." They both laughed, a sound that had been missing from their home for far too long. As the days passed, Daniel finished editing the project. He titled it The Heart Between Words. When they finally watched the complete version together, it wasn't just a film. It was a story about real people, about fear, honesty, and rediscovering what matters. There were no fancy effects or dramatic music, just raw truth. Emma couldn't believe how different she looked, not physically, but in spirit. She looked strong, open, and free. She turned to Daniel and said softly, "You gave me back my light." He shook his head. "You found it yourself. I just held the camera." The film went on to be shown at a small local screening event. People cried, smiled, and clapped. They weren't reacting to fame or drama. They were reacting to truth. Afterward,